You know, if we are talking about best of 2019, even if it's just books, gotta include Baby Yoda in this video somehow. Because I think we can all collectively agree that Baby Yoda is the best thing that ever happened to anyone in 2019. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about the best books that I read in 2019. I tried to keep this to my top 10, but I have a couple of honorable mentions that I think are worth getting in this video. So I'm gonna just talk about those first, and then we'll get to my 10 favorites. So a couple of honorable mentions. These were 5-star reads that I read this year that I absolutely loved, but just didn't quite make it into the top 10. The first being The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein, which is a contemporary adult family type drama, and it follows the perspective of the family's dog. So we get a lot of fun commentary on kind of what would go on in a dog's head if we could read their minds. As a dog owner, I absolutely loved this one. It was very emotional, a lot darker and sadder than I thought it would be going into it. And I do want to clarify, it's not sad necessarily because of the dog in the story. There are other things that go on in this family that make it very, very sad. So if any of you are avoiding this book because you think bad things will happen to this dog, well, I can't tell you that that's not totally the case. The most emotional part of this book didn't center around any sort of tragedy with this dog, so don't be afraid to read this book if you are a dog lover and just don't want to hear anything bad happening to dogs. I still loved this story. I love dogs. I didn't think it was overly tragic for any unnecessary reason, and I thought that the ending of this book, I couldn't even read the last chapter because my tears in my eyes couldn't see the words on the page. So this one, if you need a book that makes you cry, like if I ever have something stuck in my eye, I'll just read like the last chapter of this book and it'll wash right out. The next honorable mention is Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. You may have seen this going around BookTube on some of people's worst books of 2019 lists, and here it is on my best books of 2019 video. I'm definitely in the minority on this book. I think that myself and Chelsea Dolling from Chelsea Dolling Reads are like the only two that loved this book. I can see why you wouldn't like it if you don't like the main male protagonist. I just personally loved it. It worked for me. This follows the story about a girl named Georgie who has always been looked upon as kind of the little sister of the crowd. Everyone treats her like she's a kid, even though she's a grown woman now, and her job is being a clown at children's birthday parties. So she's just the most precious human being on the planet. There is no one cuter than this character, Georgie. I just loved her, and if it wasn't for her, this book wouldn't have been rated as highly as it was. She's my favorite protagonist I think I've read in a romance story like ever. She's so great, and so she has a fake relationship to make herself seem more mature, more grown up with this retired baseball player who comes back into town, and things escalate. It is very steamy. Do not let the little cute cartoon cover fool you. This is steamy, and I loved it. I just devoured this. I actually read it on my honeymoon, and it was a good choice. I loved it. The last honorable mention I have is How to Walk Away by Catherine Center, which is about a woman who is involved in a plane accident with her boyfriend, who on that night becomes her fiance, and so she ends up disabled and in the hospital while he ends up going injury-free. He is not hurt at all from this plane accident. So it's her story of her recovery process and kind of finding herself through this recovery process. I thought it was really well done. I loved the messaging in this book, and just the main character. She was so relatable and you could just really feel for her, and I loved seeing her growth in this story. So I still totally recommend this, even though it didn't make my top 10. I really, really loved it. Getting into the top 10. Let's do it, Baby Yoda. Woo! Coming in at number 10, Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. This follows two friends, Josh and Hazel, as they try to set each other up on dates and want to find each other's significant others, their best friends, and end up going on double dates together with other people. And you kind of, I mean, you know, it's gonna end with them together. It's just so much fun to see their journey there, and I loved both of these characters so much. I loved their chemistry. Hazel was adorable, just like Georgie in Fix Her Up was adorable. So was Hazel. I absolutely loved her. I loved how like strong-willed and independent she was. She didn't rely on Josh. He like complimented her. It's just so cute. So I just loved this little romance. It's definitely my favorite Christina Lauren that I've read so far. So highly recommend this one. The next book coming in at number 9 is Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. So I read Vicious last year. So if I had read it this year, that would have been on this list instead. But Vengeful, I read this year, and holy moly, oh my god. I love Victor and Eli as characters so incredibly much, and the fact that we just got to like hang out with them again and continue on with their stories and also introduce awesome new characters in this world that I love and adore and cherish so much was just the best thing ever. So if you loved Vicious, which I definitely did, then you have to read Vengeful, because it's just like building the world even more and introducing you to more kick-ass characters, and just like Victor, Eli, Sydney, just, they're so good. Characters, some of my favorite. This definitely takes the number 9 spot. Coming in at number 8 is a book that I read in December, so this was a late comer and definitely deserves a place on this top 10, and that is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. This one is about a hockey town, kind of like in the middle of nowhere in the Arctic. I don't know where, but has nothing going on except a little hockey team in high school. This is a high schoolers hockey team. They're really awesome. They win these championships and all these things, and so everyone's super into this team. But one day, one of the players does something horrendous to this woman, or to this high school girl, and the town becomes completely divided over this event. And this really packs a punch, and I have never been angrier reading a book, which may not sound appealing to you if you're like thinking about picking this up, like, do you really want to be angry? Yes, it is unbelievable. It's so powerful. I'm so glad I read this, and I can't wait to read Us Against You now. The characters in this book are so well done. It feels so real. Like, this feels like a real incident that happened that you're just reading about from like a newspaper. It's just so unbelievably powerful. So I feel like I'm saying the same words over and over again. This book makes you angry, and it really makes you think, and any book that can elicit such a strong emotion from me deserves a top tier rating and deserves to be put on this list, because it is about something so important, and I highly recommend that you read it, please. Next book, speaking of important and powerful topics, is This Is How It Always Is by Lori Frankel. This is a total surprise to me because I had no idea what this was about going into it. It is a contemporary family drama about a family where it's all boys. The husband and wife have had all boys. They have like 5 boys, and all the wife wants is a little girl. She's like, okay, I'm pregnant again. I just want a little girl. I've got like 5 boys. Surprise, it's another boy that she has. And very early on in this little boy's life, he discovers that he identifies more as a girl and has more tendencies towards more feminine things. And so his family kind of has to figure out how to deal with this in a very prejudiced society. And it's just so great, and this family is so lovable. You just love the parents and how supportive this family is. I loved every moment of this, and again, I was not expecting much going into it because I had no idea what it was about, so I was so pleasantly surprised when I found what it was really about, and just I got so invested in this family's story, and I just wanted the best for everyone. So highly recommend. How many times do I have to say highly recommend? I'm just gonna say it. I recommend all of these books, so I'm gonna stop saying highly recommend. Read it. This is number 6. Ooh, getting up there. So the number 6 spot goes to The Heart's Invisible Furies, which is another one I read in December. So a lot of latecomers to this list, but very, very much deserving. The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne is about a young boy who is born in Ireland around the 1940s, and very early on in his life, well, he is adopted. We'll say that first. He's adopted, so he doesn't know really where he came from, and his adoptive parents are hilarious. I love them so much. But he figures out very early on in life that he is gay, and growing up in Ireland, during this time period, it was the most difficult thing to be gay, and it's just unbelievable, this coming of age story. So you really follow this character as he grows up from like an 8-year-old all the way to like the 2000s, where he's like 60 or 70, I can't do math. So it's just an unbelievably powerful coming of age story that really gives great commentary on not only this character's growth within society and how he changes and matures, but also just how society has grown. It's so incredible. And I loved the character work in this novel. The 2 standouts for me, if you do decide to read this, make sure you look out for the adoptive mother and the little boy's real mother. Both of those characters were by far my favorites, but all of them are excellent, and it's just the way it's told, where we get these little snippets of different years of this man's life. It was told in such a compelling way. It kept me engaged throughout the entire novel. I loved it. It didn't drag at all. Please read this. I never thought one of these books would make this list, and that is Written in My Own Heart's Blood by Diana Gabaldon. This is the 8th book in the Outlander series. You guys, Outlander is the most monstrous series. I don't know if you know how long and how dense the books are, but I feel like they're all either close to or way over 1,000 pages long. I think the longest one is like 1,400, and they are dense. So reading this series, it was hard because some of the books really went downhill for me. I would say like books 1 and 2 and 3 were so great, and then it really went downhill as a series. But number 8, wow. And I was not expecting it because I had read so many at that point and knew Diana Gabaldon's writing style. We know the characters so well now. How can she possibly keep introducing more story? And just, I couldn't believe it. This book was my favorite in the entire series. And typically in those books, I skim through quite a lot of it because otherwise I would never get through them. And this is the first book, well, not the first book, but it was the first book in a while in this series that I didn't skim at all. I was so engaged the entire time, even with how long this book is. It is 1,117 pages. Even with how long this book is, I loved every second of it. And I think the characters shined so much more in this book than they had in previous ones. So now I'm like super excited for book 9, and I don't know when it's coming out, but dang it, Diana. Number 4. This is gonna go to Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. And is anyone surprised that Brandon Sanderson made this list? I'm not. I love Brandon Sanderson. His worlds, his characters, his magic systems, everything about them is so amazing. Warbreaker takes place in this fantasy world where we have 2 sisters. The oldest one was trained from a very early age to be married off to this kind of like warring kingdom to help kind of settle the peace between these two kingdoms. She was apparently going to be married off to this very unpredictable, potentially violent and aggressive like king and situation. So she was trained very early on about their culture and like how to deal with that. And then the younger sister got to do whatever she wanted because she didn't have to be married off, and she was just like prancing around the kingdom all happy. So when it comes time to send the older sister to be married off, the king changes his mind, performs a switcheroo, and sends the youngest sister off to be married instead. And the younger sister has no idea what she's getting herself into. The older sister is like, what did I just train my whole life for? I'm super pissed. So she goes after her younger sister to try and save her, while the younger sister has to figure out how to deal with being married to this king that apparently everyone's super afraid of. It's so good. We follow some other characters as well, but I don't want to say much more. The magic system is all based off of like colors. So in this world, you can collect what are called these breaths from people, and that breath is kind of like their spirit, like their soul. And the more breaths you have, the more colors you can see in the world. And you can also give breaths to other things to like make them come to life. So you've got the trope of like inanimate objects having a personality and speaking. It's so much fun. I loved this. It's such a bummer that it's a standalone because now I just want to be caught up in this world again, and I miss it. I miss these characters. I'm gonna have to reread it in the future because I loved it so much. I thought it was one of the more fun Brandon Sanderson novels. Usually his novels take on a more serious tone, but this one was very lighthearted compared to his other ones, and is definitely a great starting place for fantasy and as a genre and for Sanderson. So if you're looking for like, where do I start with fantasy or with Brandon Sanderson, I would actually recommend Warbreaker, maybe even over Mistborn, because Warbreaker is a standalone, so you don't have to commit yourself to this huge series. So definitely consider picking this one up. Okay, spot number 3. This is the top 3 books that I read in 2019. So spot number 3 is kind of, I'm cheating a little bit, just a little. This is actually going to go to a series as a whole that I read this year, and that is the Arc of the Scythe series, which no one's surprised. Don't act surprised, you're not, because everyone has this on their list or is talking about it in some fashion. It's so good. It's about a dystopian world where humans have conquered death, and so no one dies of natural causes anymore. So to help control the population, humans have come up with a system where they elect certain people to become scythes, and those scythes are tasked with controlling the human population. And there's a lot of politics in this book, so it goes very deep into how that scythedom works and how certain scythes are good and some scythes are evil, as you can expect. And it also goes into the world and how society got to a place where it conquered death and how that was even achievable and how they maintain that. It's unbelievable. It's one of those young adult series that I think teeters the line between adult and young adult, because it is so deep and asks really important questions about society as a whole that really makes you step back and think. Like, we could have so many philosophical discussions based off of these books and the topics that it brings up, and I think that that's unbelievable for a book series to do. I'm really tired of holding all 3, so I'm just gonna hold up Scythe. So I would say that this series as a whole became very, very plot driven. So if you are looking for some like awesome characters and a character driven series that focuses on these couple characters, this is not the series for you. This is very much follows the plot, and the characters really aren't at the forefront of this series because it's really more of a reflection and a study on human society and where we're going, what we want our society to look like in the future, and what we would do if we were faced with this kind of predicament. It's just fascinating. So I love this series. I will shout it from the rooftops forever and ever that everyone should read it, no matter your age, no matter what your preference of genre is. I don't care, because you'll love it. Well, maybe not, but you'll at least stop and think about some of the questions that it asks. And that's more than a lot of young adult series can say that I've read recently that have been very, very forgettable. Where it kind of seems a little bit cookie cutter at this point. They all follow the same sort of format and kind of have like the same sort of characters and same sort of plot lines. This is so unique and different, so at least it will really make you think and you'll remember it. Number 2 spot goes to Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Okay. So I know that this is not going to be everybody's cup of tea because it is slower paced. It definitely is slower paced. But what this book follows is it follows a young girl named Kaya who is born in this swamp with her family, like in the 1960s, I think, where she is kind of abandoned as a young girl by her family and has a really rough childhood where she kind of pretty much has to raise herself in this swamp, and the town near the swamp kind of thinks of her as a total outcast. No one is interested in having anything to do with Kaya, so she kind of has this reputation of being like this swamp girl that everyone tries to just avoid and forget about, and she's kind of stuck on her own. And it's her coming of age story, but then halfway through the book we get this like murder mystery and we get a whole court trial as well. And when that part of the book hit, this book went from being a 4 to a 5 stars instantly because I could not put it down. I was reading this on a plane coming back from my honeymoon, and I was in line at the immigration office reading this book, and I'm sure everyone was like, really? You just can't put the book down? No, I can't put the book down. It was so good. And I just had to know how it would end. And Kaya is a character that you just feel so much emotion for. You just love her and feel so horrible for her. And the ending, whew, don't even get me started. It is an unbelievable book and story and characters, and just, this is another one that I'm just gonna keep recommending to you, no matter what kind of books you like or what your age is. I'm gonna say, here, read this one because it is so good. Number 1 is going to go to if you've watched any of my previous videos, this is not surprising at all. This was my biggest surprise, probably ever, in any book. This was horror, and I usually don't read horror. Not a huge fan. And Stephen Chbosky, who wrote Perks of Being a Wallflower, I read that book this year, and I rated it like 3 stars or something. Because I was like, yeah, I'm sure it was great if I was a high schooler, and I just didn't connect to it as much now. So this book I was not expecting to love. And it said that it was about a young boy who moves to a new town with his mother to kind of escape this bad husband situation, or boyfriend or husband or whatever it is, abusive relationship. And so they escape to this new town. And the little boy, he goes out into the woods after school one day and disappears for 6 days. And no one knows where he goes during those 6 days, but he is found after 6 days and he can't remember anything that happened. But now he has this imaginary friend, this voice in his head telling him that he has to build a treehouse in the forest by Christmas, or the rest of the town will change forever and everyone he knows will be in danger. And that was the synopsis that's on the sleeve. I don't have the actual book because my mom's borrowing it right now to read it because I forced her to. So if you're like, why are you just holding the sleeve? That's why. I had no expectations going into this book. And what we got was a book that is probably the most bingeable and exciting and thrilling book I've ever read in my whole life. It's been a really long time where I've had a book capture me so much where I keep thinking about it every single time I put it down. I couldn't stop thinking about this book, and I had to pick it up every single free second I had. I had to pick this up and finish it because I just had to know what the hell was happening. The characters in this book, Kate, the mother, and Christopher, the little boy, are the most precious things. I loved them so much. And their relationship, just everything about them. So them alone would have made this book a 5 stars. But then you had this plot that just kept building and building, and this dread and this tension just building and building. And the climax of this book is just unbelievable. You're like, what the hell? And the message in this book, it's sold as a horror, but it's so much more than this ghost story. It's so much more than what you'd expect it to be. It's got this unbelievable message and theme, and it's not going to be for everybody. Don't get me wrong. I totally understand the people who don't like the second half of this novel because it really takes a turn when you get to about the halfway point in this novel. And if you like that turn that it takes, you're gonna love this book because it totally worked for me. And it's just something really, really special that I haven't had such a reaction to in a very long time. And I feel like anytime I'm ever in a reading slump in the future, this will be the book I automatically pick up because I think it's probably my all-time favorite book ever. I'm like, you guys, you're probably like, oh my god, how good is this? It is the best book. So again, I don't think it's going to be for everybody, and I have a full review that talks way more about it, but the people that it's for, it's really going to resonate and stick with you for a very long time. And even if you don't like where the book ends, that journey there is going to capture the majority of people. So even if you don't love the ending, I think overall as in a reading experience, you'll still really like this book because it's just one of those that never stops for a second and never lets you go. So in terms of the level of horror in this book, I would say if you think Stranger Things is too scary for you, then this might be too scary for you. If you are not bothered by the TV show Stranger Things on Netflix, this probably will not bother you. I thought it was the amount of scariness that TV show had. So take that as your warning. I don't know what more I have to say. It's the best. Those are my top books that I read in 2019. What were some of the books that you read that were your absolute favorites? I would love to know. So leave your comments down below. Did any of these books make your own top 10? Maybe make your worst 10. That's okay. We can totally have different opinions and still be friends. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And until next time, bye.